every single step on that journey that led me to that position, once I achieve the success I'm looking for, then everything's going to be good. If I just get that promotion or I get that number in my bank account, so many people I come across are just chasing this, whatever it is, this thing that they're defining as success. Either you're growing or developing or you're declining. There is no kind of gray area there. Did I kind of let this success go to my head, and am I just being content with status quo?
All right, Aaron, welcome to the Relevant Development Podcast. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm great, Juan. I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so bring the listeners up to speed about who you are and how you come to be where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. So, for me, the origin story starts back to really when I was thrown into a leadership position at 23, 24 years old. And it was really one of those sink or swim type of moments. I had to figure out a lot of things very, very quickly from the strategy standpoint, the operations standpoint. And what you quickly realize is, you come out of college and yeah, you may be exposed to a lot of things. You may learn a lot of things there. But one of the things that you don't have a firm grasp on is really how to lead people. So as I look at the journey ahead from that point, I did have some success and it came very quick, very fast. Part of that was being in the right place at the right time, but was really helping drive and lead an organization that was on a very, very high growth trajectory. So that ended with me, becoming a member of the senior executive leadership team. I now had responsibility for $1 billion plus business,
Wow.
publicly traded NASDAQ company. And this was all before the age of 30.
I was just going to ask that, what was the difference in age from 23 to this position?
Yeah, so it was a very, very high growth, 7 or 8 years. And,
Wow.
while that's the headline, what sat underneath that was I'm confident that I made every single possible mistake there was to be made as an emerging kind of leader. And, it really all came to a head about that time, 7 or 8 years later, where I'm finding myself in new rooms and it started to hit me. It wasn't one thing, it was a couple of different, let's just call them feedback loops that, really had me sit back and say, am I still in growth mode? Did I become complacent? Did I kind of let this success go to my head? And am I just being content with status quo? And it really hit me that what got me here is not going to get me there, just like the old saying goes. And that was my fork in the road moment. I could either continue down the path that I was going down and probably see my career peak out right there. I knew deep down I wasn't playing my best game. I knew deep down I wasn't in learning mode. I was kind of arrogant. I thought I had it all figured out, thought I was the smartest person in the room, thought I was the young hot shot. But luckily I chose the other path. I went out, got some external help in the form of professional coaching, and really committed to getting back into growth mode. I kind of went back to the drawing board, redefined myself, redesigned my strategy ahead. And I would say over the next kind of 5, 6, 7, 8 years, what emerged as a development area that I mentioned around leading people, nurturing people, building teams and getting them up to the next level, I really wanted to convert that weakness into a strength. And something unique happened along that way is that development area turned into a strong interest. I kept pulling on that thread. It turned into a passion. I kept pulling on that thread. And it really emerged as kind of just a very high purpose way of operating that I really wanted to kind of dedicate the next chapter of my life and career to. And that's working with high performance leaders, high performance individuals, and being what I really didn't have. I wanted to create that support system that really serves as a springboard that accelerates their path from good to great. So that's what's led me to this conversation today and has led to the founding of my firm that really allows me the opportunity to do that every single day now.
I want to go back a little bit because I want to be the your next client or your next student, right? If I could be a fly on the wall during that time. You talked about there was this huge growth. So I want to go there first, and then I'll have a follow-up question after. Huge growth within that first, what'd you say, 5, 6, 7 years where you kind of got thrown into, swim, right, in this leadership position. And then 7 6, 7 years later, you had this huge responsibility. What was the growth process for you on that? Because from what it sounds like, it was more self-development or learning the ropes. How was the growth journey to go from, because I think I know for me, I had a pretty fast success as well. And I know what I went through in my journey to get that. What did you have to do to grow that fast? And what did you have to kind of filter and go, like, what was that process in that fast growth?
Yeah, yeah. For me, as I kind of look back, if I could summarize it, it was just moving exceptionally fast. Because I was younger, didn't have the status, I was a bit more willing to kind of take risk, and I kind of had a bigger appetite for failure. But I viewed failure a bit differently in the sense that it was just going to be in the event that it happened. We were going to plan like hell to make sure that it didn't happen. But if it did, that's a learning accelerator. And so I think what I was doing good in those early days that was helping drive that success was just being a sponge. I turned myself into a learning machine and, was constantly looking to connect dots. And I think the important thing to know was every single step on that journey that led me to that position, you could argue I was unqualified for. And too many times we kind of sit back and look at our journeys and look at our careers. We kind of look at the risk of doing something. I'm not qualified. I'm not ready. I'm not this. And what I found to be hugely successful is, there's a healthy element to jumping into things that you're not qualified for, because if you can learn, if you can have the grit factor, if you can persevere, all of the learning comes by doing. And so when you get out there and start doing and taking action and putting yourself in situations that are going to make you uncomfortable, when you're forced to operate at the very outer edges of your current capability, that's where all the learning comes from. So had I not taken those opportunities and taken on those challenges, the rate of learning would have happened at a fraction that it otherwise would have. So I think that was, as I kind of look back at that time period, it was not only committing to be a learning machine, but throwing myself into situations where I would be exposed to the single largest amount of learning stimuli, so to speak, for there to be a really target-rich learning environment.
What I hear you saying is that you understood and knew what opportunity looked like, smelt like, felt like, everything. And so you took every opportunity that came your way, you accelerated, and then you got to a point where you felt like maybe you knew it all. You talked about feeling complacent, or you got complacent and you felt like, you were the smartest in the room. Where do you think that transition, or what allowed that to happen, to go from, I want to learn opportunity, now I can coast and I know this and I know that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, I'm better than you. Like, where did that, because that wasn't always Aaron's thought process. Aaron's thought process was to learn and take every opportunity. What happened where it plateaued?
Yeah. And you're kind of speaking to really the core message and theme that drives my work today. And it is around this big myth that exists that, well, everything's just going to be good. Once I achieve the success I'm looking for, then everything's going to be good. If I just get that promotion, or I get that number in my bank account, so many people I come across are just chasing this, whatever it is, this thing that they're defining as success. And there's not enough voices, in my opinion, that are helping guide that journey to say success can be the very thing that prevents future success. So after you have some of those big wins, after you have some of those big achievements, when you have people kind of cheering you on and saying, great job, telling you you're the smartest one in the room at sometimes, if you let that go to your head, if you let that artificially validate you and inflate the ego, it is natural across all human elements, whether it's in business, whether in life. You see it all the time in sports. What happens to the fighter who wins the belt? What happens to the team that wins the Super Bowl? Everybody always says it's a hell of a lot harder to repeat than it is to get there the first time. And it's because we have almost this letdown period. Once we when everything around us is telling us that, hey, we've kind of made it. You are the definition of success. You've had it. You've achieved. If you lose awareness and you lose clarity of what got you there, it's so easy to forget all the things that, were the inputs that led to that output. And you naturally take a step back. You become a bit more complacent. You're kind of now okay because today's status quo looked a hell of a lot better than the status quo 7 years
Right.
ago.
Right.
So we're naturally fooled into thinking that the space we're now in is safe and comfortable and secure. And I don't think there are enough voices talking to leaders on their journey to say, hey, watch out, beware. When you start feeling good, it's exactly when the door starts staying cracked open for complacency to sneak in. And the fact of the matter is, for professionals, if you're not growing and developing, you are declining. It may be a very small decline where it's not noticeable week after week or day after day, but don't fool yourself into thinking that the decline's not there. There is no just staying equal, staying level.
Right.
Either you're growing or developing or you're declining. There is no
Right.
kind of gray area there.
Yeah, makes sense. So who or what was that voice that made you become aware that, hey, you're slacking or you're putting it in cruise control? What was that voice? Was it like a book, a seminar? Was it a professor? Was it a mentor? What was it for you?
Yeah, it was several different things. I mean, look, I was getting some real world feedback from some other stakeholders. I still carry with me to this day. It's in my backpack, but we had a third party team come in and do 360-degree, kind of different executive bio and executive kind of feedback reports on all the top executives. So some interesting things came out of there, but we tend to trick ourselves sometimes, but the truth always remains kind of internal if you go and look for it. And so if you're willing to do the deep thought work, you're not going to need a third party or a stakeholder or a book to kind of provide you insight for you to know that you're not playing your best game. You're not, showing up and delivering full potential. You're not going all out. And too many people, because of success, because of a number of different things, kind of get tricked into getting stuck in that comfort zone. But the truth always lives deep down. We know when we show up and we're delivering 100% and when we're not. And so it just takes internal awareness for you to be able to make the decision, is this how I'm going to operate for the rest of my career and the rest of my life? Or am I sick enough or fed up enough of me playing at only half the potential and half the capability that I know that I'm capable of, and I'm going to recommit to going back out there and showing up as my best version? So it really comes down to the will to want to change comes from internally. There's going to always be, feedback loops and things that are external that will help kind of, give us hints. But if you're not aware, if you're not clear to be able to take those hints and bring them internal to say, hey, I'm kind of complacent. I'm kind of comfortable right now. It's time to get uncomfortable and go out and do some truly extraordinary things that are going to stretch and challenge me. I think deep down, we all have that compass. It's whether or not we pay attention to it or not.
Got it. So you went from fast success. We talked about moving into this transition of self-awareness, and then you said that you then got executive help. So you went and got help. Kind of want to see the difference in learning and thought process and in mindset from you doing it yourself, getting thrown into the mix, you reading, learning from mistakes, you doing that, and then getting somebody outside and getting coaching. What's the difference in maybe your growth and in the learning curve? What's the difference at those two levels when it comes to leveling yourself up, kind of self learning and then getting somebody like an executive coach?
It was night and day. It was so stark that it made me actually feel stupid for thinking in the past that I could do all this on my own. I got it all figured out. When we're able to have kind of what I refer to as those thought partnership or insight stakeholders, if the only thing that we're using to kind of stress test ideas and gain perspective and find different ways to look at things, the only thing that we're using is the voice inside of our head, we're in trouble, right? There's going to be a very low ceiling on our growth and our trajectory. And so when you can find a partner to help with that, a partner whose sole focus is to help you get to where you want to go, who is going to tell you the things that you need to hear, not just the things that you want to hear, and can be that person, to be that support system, that stretches your thinking, helps you see problems and solutions from an entirely different lens. And you said a key word there, that's accelerate the learning. I can't even put a number to it, whether it's a 5x, 10x, but I think that is the power of really strong coaching relationships that I continue to see daily today. But what I really experienced back then was the learning, the feedback loop, the stretching of my thinking that helped me see things that I may have already known, but really couldn't put narratives and frameworks around because it just wasn't clear enough. We just can't generate that type of clarity from that voice bouncing around and all the noise in our own minds. So to be able to have a partner to help with that is I think night and day, maybe even understating it. It was a complete trajectory changing move that I continue to be thankful for today and continue to use coaching as a result of that today. I think for any coach or anybody who calls themselves a coach that's out there, every coach needs a coach. It is that important. And if you're truly serious about growing, developing your craft, becoming a better version of yourself, I don't know of a single better weapon you could have in your arsenal than a great kind of coaching partner.
In your learning and in your development, you talk about a performance mindset. What is the difference in like a growth mindset? You hear that word a lot, that buzzword a lot. Growth mindset, whatever, a strong mindset. What is a performance mindset?
Yeah, I love tackling this one because I think you're right, and for good reason. I think a lot of the great research that Carol Dweck has done from Stanford and shows up in her famous book now, Mindset. I think the two mainstream definitions of mindset are, I think everybody knows about now. You either have a fixed mindset or you have a growth mindset. And while I don't think it's that simple, I like to kind of do a little mapping exercise that I refer to as my 70-20-10 rule. Throughout my career, all the presentations I've given, all the speaking engagements, all the teams I've run, the one thing that I've seen generally apply to every team, every group, and every room is kind of a 70-20-10 mindset rule. And if we were to first just start with the 20%, these are going to be the people in the room that you most closely identify with a fixed mindset, right? They don't want change. They don't like change. They want things to remain just as they are. They want that they will openly admit to you, I'm not here to grow and develop and learn. I would rather dish out guidance and advice. You typically, to put this in a firm example, you typically would see this with people maybe at the later stages of their career, where they're more focused about getting to retirement than they are kind of evolving themselves. And so they don't want change. They don't want the world around them to change. They don't want their environments to change. They want to be able to leverage their 20 years, 30 years, and they'll be quick to tell you how many years experience they have. They want to be able to leverage that. So any change is kind of a threat to them. They want things to remain smooth, comfortable, and they prioritize kind of the status quo. So you'll see about 20% of people in a room, 2 out of 10, 20 out of 100, that in some way, shape, or form align with that. Here's where it gets interesting. The 70%, this is going to be the ones that identify with your, as we all know, the growth mindset, right? And it's become very popular, almost even a buzzword, that belief, that thought process, that with the proper amount of time, energy, and effort, you can enhance your skills, you can develop new capabilities, you can build your intelligence, and you can have the mindset to overcome the obstacles because you always believe that you can get better. When you ask the question of who identifies with a growth mindset in these rooms, without fail, at least 70% of the hands go up. Here's where it gets interesting. Their habits, their behaviors, their actions don't look all that different from the 20%. So they may think all the right things. They may believe all the right things. You go to their LinkedIn profiles, they're posting all the right things about a growth mindset, but they're operating much in the form of being content with the status quo. So you look at their bias for action to develop. You look at their bias for action to do something with that belief they have, and it may be very tough to find. So that's what, whenever I was looking to really engage in this work, I noticed a subgroup. There's almost this 10% group. They're going to be the small minority in every room, maybe the 1 out of 10, maybe the 10 out of 100. These are the ones taking action. These are the ones consistently getting uncomfortable, taking on challenges, stretching themselves, having a bigger appetite for failure because they know that that's where all the learning is. So they may have the same amount of success as everyone else in the room, but they're not looking in the rearview mirror. They're going to find out what they're capable of. They're signing up for the most toughest, challenging, low risk or high risk, low probability assignments. And so what separates the performance mindset group from just the growth mindset group is that big differentiator, that bias for action, that willingness and desire to do the things required consistently to make themselves better, to continuously improve and evolve. That's what separates a performance mindset from just the growth mindset.
How does one know where they are on that spectrum of that 70-20-10? Like kind of talking about that self-awareness and hey, I'm slacking, I am becoming complacent, and I'm plateauing. How do I, if I'm the worker, that employee, or that person that has that mindset, how do I go, I'm the 20%, how do I move to this other percentile? How do I move myself on this line? What do you think has to happen? Is that the responsibility of the employee to have the self-awareness, or is it do you think that it is the awareness of the leader to say, oh, this is one of those employees, let me help them move or transition or help them with their thought process, their mindset? Where do we point the finger? Where does that start? Like almost what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like whose fault is it, or whose ability is it to say, hey, this is where you are? Is it the individual or their leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. And why that's a great question is because the answer is kind of embedded there in the question. And it all comes down to accountability. And with the performance mindset group, they're putting the accountability on themselves. They're not waiting for anybody to tell them they need to level up. They're not waiting for someone to say, this is an area of improvement. They're going out there and they're collecting that feedback. They're taking action and learning from it. They're not coasting. They're not in status quo. They have made it kind of their standard operating procedure to get uncomfortable and get comfortable doing that. Where the other ones, it's those other two groups, may need it called out, may need a little bit of help. They're not going to gravitate towards that challenge. In some cases, they may even be a bit shy around the feedback that they get, right? It's like you can always tell where a person is on the spectrum based on how they handle feedback. So if they're defensive, if they're challenging, if they want to kind of debate it, well, you don't have all the facts, you don't understand, they're either going to be in that 70% group, and if they really go to the extreme and challenge it and completely ignore it, they're going to be in that 20% group. The 10%ers, they're going to be the ones taking notes. They're going to want to learn, it's like, okay, what nugget of wisdom can I extract from this feedback and apply it to get better? And so I really think it comes down to, you can gauge that mapping based on how accountable you are for making yourself aware of what needs to happen. Because again, we can tell ourselves any narrative, but when you're showing up and only giving half your potential and you're going through the motions, you can say anything you want to, but deep down, you're going to know you're not playing your best game. You're going to know you're not pushing as hard as you can. You're going to know you're not doing everything required to operate in the top performance group. And so that level of accountability really serves as a great indicator of who is going to be personally accountable. Huge indicator that they're going to be in the performance mindset group, to where they don't need a lot of external help to push them to take action, versus the more reactive groups that need the feedback, that need those external forces to then either create some drive or motivation to start taking action. That performance mindset group's not going to need any help taking action. They're going to learn from the failures, versus wait to sit back and have someone tell them that they're not operating at their full potential.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about my time, my family's time, my wife's time of hearing stories, right? Because we all have stories of work. And there are people who become more self-aware as they move forward in their ability to learn and to grow and things like that. But it's just crazy to me that you have some staff, some line staff, employees that have no idea that they're lacking. I come into work and they see that they think that they work harder than everybody else. And there's even people in management positions and leadership positions that think that, bluntly saying that their shit don't stink. And I am a good manager and I do my thing. It's them, right? The employee says, well, I do my job. It's so-and-so that's always doing this. And if you talk to those other people, they're like, no. And I'm just giving a name out there. Samantha's the one that has an attitude every time she comes in. She never wants to do anything extra. And if you talk to, Samantha's like, no, I do all my work and everybody else has it out for me. It's like, so then how do you get that person that is not self-aware to become aware? Because I think that some people have it and some people don't. And then it does take that outside source to say, hey, can we talk? Hey, read this book or go to this lesson, go to this seminar. Or it takes almost like, growing up, your parents could tell you something and you wouldn't listen. But if your friend's mom or your friend's dad told you something, you're like, oh, this makes sense. And then your parents are like, I told you that same thing. Like, what the heck? But it's like, it almost like there's two definitive demographics of people and leaders, of people who either on one side either are fully aware or they become somewhat aware after some time, like, well, maybe I need to change. And oh my gosh, maybe I do this. I think those two people are on one side. The other side is like, people are just so oblivious. There's times I've gotten into organizations and I'm like, you're the leader. How come you're not saying anything? How come you're not doing anything? And then you talk to the employees and it's all pointing fingers. And then you look at their maybe their record, if you will, or their file. And it's like, you come into work or you've been written up X amount of time. Like, how come you don't see this? Where's your coaching? Where's this? And it's like, those people are literally have zero clue and they think that they are the god of the workplace. And it's like, no, you're the one that's ruining everybody's time here. I think there's a Gallup poll that shows that there are people that are like 18% of people are purposely not engaged. Like, their job is almost to be the thorn in your flesh. Like, they are completely disengaged, so much so that they are causing issues more than they are even finding solutions. And it's like, what I would want to walk those people out and walk them through the process of, sorry, you've been written up X amount of times, for employees and for managers. But do you believe, or do you think that awareness, that performance mindset is just going to pop up on somebody, or does that have to be told from either their leader or maybe a friend of theirs that they vent to? Because again, I really truly believe that not everybody has the self-awareness, and that's really hard to come by, and that comes through maturity and things like that. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think it speaks to kind of how, at least with my analysis and my experience, is kind of why the number is what it is. It's like, I haven't seen a team, a group, or a room where that mindset, that performance mindset, is going to show up in more than 10%. It is what makes up your top 10%, which means you're going to have a lot of work to do with the other 90, right? And so, yeah, where I think that comes natural, I think it's kind of built in. I think it's kind of a standard of excellence that the small minority of those top performers have for themselves. That leaves a hell of a lot of the employee pool left that's going to need some work. And that's why I think it really comes down. And that's why leadership is such an awesome responsibility and privilege. And I wish more people took that to heart, where, just because you get put into a manager or leadership role, that's where the work starts. That's not where it stops. You haven't made it. That's where it starts. And I think everything that you just talked about, that's where leaders have to operate a culture, an environment of transparency and of clarity, in helping provide, to your point, especially in team dynamics, help provide some of that awareness. Because if one of your worst is walking around thinking that they're one of the best, the leader of that team may need to sit back and say, there should be some culture recalibration going on. There's definitely a lack of transparency here. And it all comes down to the goal and the process, right? Your goal should always drive the process. And so when you look at what an employer, what a team is doing, that's always kind of back to the using a quote from school. That's where you show your work. And so that's where you should always be able to point to, or are you doing the things required to achieve the goal? or are you not? You made a great point around some of the performers that, quiet quitting, such a big thing, and that's a big buzzword out there. And some of the people on a team, you've seen it, I've seen it. Some of them just actually try their best, almost stay camouflage, right? They don't want any attention on them. They kind of want to operate in their, going through the motions. They don't want to be challenged. They kind of want to be left alone. It reminds me of a great quote from the great college football coach, Nick Saban, when he kind of has a different way of breaking up these three groups. I call it the 70-20-10 mindset rule, but he thinks about this in terms of how he sees his athletes perform. And he made the quote and the observation of saying the average athletes, they want to be left alone. They want to blend in. They don't want to do anything too bad or too good. And, they don't want the spotlight. The good, kind of slightly above average, they want coaching, but it kind of stops there. It's like, sure, I'm open to feedback, but there's no real drive or desire to kind of go out and get it, right? If it comes to them, sure, they're open to it. If it doesn't, fine. But what he found about the great athletes, the true superstars, or for the point of this conversation, that top 10%, the performance mindset group, they want to be told the truth and they want feedback every second of every single day because of their drive to consistently improve. They've got a continuous improvement edge to them to where they go out and seek it out. They want it. They keep it coming. I want the spotlight on me. I want to know, no matter how great things are, I want to know how I can improve. And I've always thought that quote of how he looks at his average, good, and great players is so applicable here to what we're seeing in the business world.
And just to be clear for those people listening and watching, is take a second to step back and really get into that mindset or that thought process of that person who wants to do better. What Aaron is saying, and that Nick Saban has alluded to, is that the high performers, they want to know how they can improve. They're not I would say that the person who does not want to perform, that doesn't have the performance mindset, hears that sentence and or the words being said is, how do I improve? That person hears, what am I doing wrong? And that's not the case.
That's
right. High performers don't want to know how to improve by hearing what they did wrong. It's, this is what you did, this is how you make it better. And their emphasis and their foundation is on, this is how the process to become better. It's not, this is what you did that is wrong. The emphasis and the foundation is, this is how I become better. So it's on the I hate to say destination, but it's on that destination piece. My eye is on the path and the place, the path and the destination, right? The determination to the destination to become better. And it's not in, which is a broke mindset or the victim mindset of, well, you're just telling me what I'm doing wrong. Mm-hmm. There's a huge difference in the thought process. So when you hear Aaron and Nick Saban say, I want to know how to improve every single day, it's what it's not saying is, tell me everything that I've done wrong. It's, this is how you become better. There's a process in becoming better. And I think in my opinion, that's how you can differentiate the two mindsets, is what is said and then the outcome of what's actually heard, right? You hear that saying of like, well, it's not what you said, it's how you say it. No. Be factual. This is what is said. Take that and roll with it, right? So.
Yeah. And there's kind of two other elements that I think bolt on perfectly there. And it's speed to feedback and time to action, right? Yep. So when you look
on that, holy moly, speak on that.
Yeah. And so when you think about, I've never had a person come up to me and say, Aaron, I don't want to see any better results. I don't want to see better improvement. I don't want to see better performance. We all have that innate desire to just generate better results in life. So when you really look at how to speed up the acceleration of improvement and better results, it ties back directly to your speed to feedback. If you're not getting any feedback, if you're not finding out in any way, shape, or form how you can be better, as you just said, how in the hell do you expect to improve? Just by natural osmosis? So the 10% performance mindset have an exceptional speed to feedback. They get more feedback more quickly than everybody else around them. So guess what? They have a better idea, better strategy, and better game plan on how to improve the very next day. And that brings me to the time to action. It's one thing to know and acknowledge what you need to do to improve. It's another thing entirely around taking the necessary action to improve. So think about that time period, that time that sits in the middle between acknowledging what to do and actually doing. When you can bring those two together and you have a very fast speed to feedback loop, and then you shorten the time between acknowledgement and actually doing, that is what the top 10% do. Yeah. And everybody else that never gets the results that they want and always feel like they're underachieving or underperforming, you can look at those two things and they probably aren't getting a lot of feedback. And if they are, they're slow to go out there and get it. And once they get it, there's a huge gap between knowing what they need to do and actually doing what's required to generate the improvement.
I see two kind of images in my head, and bring this to the surface, bring this to the light, and in a real-time situation of what this looks like is the difference in organizations that have evaluations at the end of the year compared to ones that do them quarterly. Yep. Right? You talk about speed to feedback, right? So if you look at the difference in culture and in employees in this performance mindset, and even the leadership from the leaders, is when I come and give you an evaluation at the end of the year, and this is one of my pet peeves in leadership, is when people do that. It's like, hey, this is all the things that you've done right. This is all the things that you've done wrong. I need you to fix these. Well, now that person then probably thinks and says, well, I wish I would have known this 6-7 months prior because I could have fixed those things. And so we do this with our kids in school, right? We have a progress report card, progress report, final report card. So why aren't we doing like check-ins or progress reports with the employees and the leadership, the C-suite people to those managers and supervisors to make sure that they're leading the right way? But how come there's not a progress report? Hey, this is what's going on. These are the things I need you to fix. And then the mid-year eval to then do that, because then it creates an environment of, hey, you might want to fix this. It's almost like, and this is the second vision that I have, is like when your light goes off in your vehicle, your car, hey, your oil is low. It's not at the lowest, but it's getting low. You need to do something about it. And if there's not a speed to feedback and that light comes on when you need to make the change, as opposed to, hey, you might want to start thinking about making this change, we would ruin our vehicles. Imagine if your car tells you, hey, you're out of gas. Not that you're low on gas, but you're out of gas. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to say, how come you didn't tell me this sooner? And the car would then say, well, there is a gauge, right? Full, empty. And we're letting you know it's getting less and less and less and less and less and less. But then there's a thing that says, bing, you have like 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80 miles left. You might want to start putting gas soon.
Yes.
So if we're able to do that for ourselves, I would even say this: employees, if your boss isn't doing those things, if the leadership isn't doing those things, you have to take it upon yourself to then say, hey, I need a checkup. Am I doing everything that you need to? Work on expectations. Am I doing what you're expecting me to do? But there's got to be that communication between person and person, right? The boss to the employee. And I love that you talked about the speed to feedback, and then what'd you say, the acceleration to action? Like there's got to be, now you got to do something.
Yep, time to action.
Yeah, that time to action is huge, because again, you can get the bing on your dashboard that says you need to change your oil, put gas. But if there's not time to action and you prolong that time, well, guess what? You're going to be a sitting duck. You're going to be on the side of the road while everyone else is excelling and getting to their destination, but you're not, because you failed to put time behind that action.
Yeah. Look, the simple truth is, and the faster that you come to grips with this, the better. Nobody's going to do the work for you. Yeah. Right. So you can get all the feedback, you can get all the indicators, you can get all the advice you want. Nobody's going to do the work for you. That's on you. You've got to move. You've got to have a bias for action. You've got to be relentless. And if you're not, no problem with that. That's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be in the top of their field. That's okay. But you just need to align your expectations with that. Kind of going back to the employee example that you mentioned earlier, is how many times have we kind of done some of the career or success planning with an employee, and they kind of told us what their goal and aspiration was. I want to be in the top 10%. I want to be in the top 5% performers. And they're also going to be the same ones to complain that they're having to do maybe a little bit more, asked to do this, and the others aren't asked to do that. when it comes back down to just calibration, your process has to match your goal. So if you want to be in that top tier group, if you want to be considered one of the top performers, if you want to be considered one of the best, pick any number you want to, let's say the top 10%, then you are going to have to do what the other 90% is either not willing or not capable of doing. And if you don't want to do that, then you have to adjust your expectations that nobody's just going to pick you up and place you in the top 10% without you doing the work. And I think that's such a great analogy that you brought up. And if you're only having those growth and feedback conversations with your team once a year or once every 6 months, there's no way for you to quickly adjust someone who has that goal, but also has the attitude that they don't want to step up and do more. I mean, imagine if you could help them calibrate on either a weekly or bi-weekly basis of saying, hey, well, is this still your goal? You wanted to be in the top 10%, right? But you also don't want to be asked to do more than everybody else. We either need to align the process or realign the goal, because doing what is average and then expecting above average results is kind of insanity. The world doesn't work that way. Right. So if you want to perform above average, you need to be putting in above average inputs. It's just that simple.
Right. Yep. What's that saying? And if you want to be an extraordinary worker, an extraordinary person, you have to do the extra, right? You got to do the extra to become extraordinary. Right. Before we go, 2 questions. Because the organization that I run is Raise the Bar, how have you raised the bar? What has helped you raise the bar? Whether that's a person, a book, a process, what has helped you raise the bar?
Yeah. So I'll kind of speak to, kind of an operating system that I've kind of adopted. And, it really goes back to, I was always curious, especially after people have some success, right? Why do some people keep finding new levels of success and keep achieving and keep growing? And others, like we talked about, the same trap that I fell into, how do they just then stagnate and kind of plateau out? So said differently, going back to the top 10%, is there a formula that they are doing that keeps them in the top 10%? And here's what I found, and here's what I've adopted for myself. Really comes down to 3 big buckets that if you can check these boxes on a consistent basis, it is in fact going to be your bar raising kind of operating system. So number 1, the best of the best always out prepare everyone around them. So be a good student, do your homework, do your due diligence, never get caught off guard. Preparation is key. How do you expect to outperform everybody if you're not in a position to out-prepare everybody? So I think first and foremost, it starts with preparation. Are you a best-in-class preparer? Are you prepared for worst case scenario? Are you prepared for the inevitable curveballs that life and work is going to throw at you? That's number 1. Number 2 is you just have to outwork everybody around you. Mm-hmm. And I want to clarify this because this isn't some hustle culture speak where I'm saying go out there and work 80 hours in a week. But let's face it, none of us are paid and rewarded on our effort. We're paid and rewarded on results. So when I say outwork, that's being able to outproduce everyone around you. So we all only have 24 hours in a day. We all only have 7 days in a week. We all only have 12 months. So what are you doing with yours that's above and beyond what everybody else is doing with theirs? And it comes down to productivity and leverage. How can you generate the maximum amount of output with the minimum amount of inputs? So it's being able to create leverage, create scale, create mass productivity out of your increments of time. So that's number 2. And number 3, quite frankly, maybe even the most important than the other 2, is you have to outlearn everyone around you. Mm. When you are a lifelong learner, that is a single, guaranteed, sustainable competitive advantage you will always have. The one thing that separates those that can't break into the 10% versus the ones that stay in the 10%, just like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger say, you have to be a learning machine. You've got to be a sponge. You've always got to keep learning, evolving, elevating, and transforming yourself. If you're not, goes back to one of the things we talked about at the very beginning. If you are not growing and developing, you are declining. There is no workaround. There is no hack. There is no shortcut to that. So if you can commit to doing those three things and use that as an operating system for yourself, out prepare, outwork, and outlearn everyone around you, you're going to see your own bar continue to raise to another level, to another level, and to another level. So check those three boxes consistently.
That's great. I want to end there because that was some great advice for our listeners on how they can raise the bar. Hey, how can we keep in touch with you? How can the listeners follow you, your work, and your coaching?
Yeah. So first place to go to would be my website. That's performancemindsetcoaching.co. You can learn more about my specific performance mindset methodology, the approach, the different levels at which we target, and the different programs that are available there. And then also to feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, trying to share and deliver as much value to the community there as I possibly can. So I like to tell people, let's connect, follow me. And it's always going to be a high ROI for you because I'm constantly trying to give back and share value on all these different mindset approaches that lead to better performance.
Awesome. Aaron, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for what you've taught me and the listeners in how to become a higher performer and how to be self-aware in those things to continue to get better. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much. And for everyone out there, continue to raise the bar and pull yourself up to the next level, but you can't do that unless you raise that bar. Hopefully that this development was relevant for your development. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on the next show.